something happens, and then the news of it travels outward. The event first, the signal after. That's just the order things go in. The signal crosses whatever distance it needs to cross and eventually arrives. That part, the arriving, has always seemed like the reliable part. There's a certain comfort in the way news travels. Not just human news, the physical kind. The kind that moves through space, whether anyone asked for it or not. A star releases light, and the light moves outward in every direction at once, carrying information about what just happened, and that information keeps moving until something intercepts it. The universe has always worked this way. Events produce signals, and signals travel, and somewhere, eventually, something receives them. It's such a fundamental part of how everything operates that it barely registers as an assumption. It's just the texture of how things are. Something happens out there, and in principle, however long it takes, the record of that thing is in transit, traveling on its way. The delay might be enormous. The signal might be faint by the time it arrives, stretched and cooled by the distance it crossed. But it comes. You're probably resting right now, or close to it. The room around you is doing what rooms do, holding still, letting time pass. And out there, in whatever portion of sky is above wherever you are, light is arriving constantly from distances that are genuinely difficult to hold in the mind. Some of that light left its source before the Earth existed. Some of it left before the solar system existed. It traveled all that time, across all that space, and it arrived here, tonight, and some small fraction of it is landing on whatever surface is near you right now. The event happened billions of years ago. The signal is only now completing its journey, but it completed it. That's the pattern the mind settles into, events and their signals, separated by time but ultimately connected by the fact that the signal moves, and space, however large, is something light can cross. Except there's a portion of everything that has ever happened, for which that last part quietly stops being true. A vast portion of everything that has ever happened falls outside that pattern. Events that occurred, signals that left light that has been traveling ever since. And none of it closing the distance between there and here. The light moves. It has always been moving. But the distance between the source and us keeps growing while the signal is in transit. And it grows in a way the signal cannot compensate for, no matter how long it travels. So the gap stays open, and arrival simply never happens. This is already true for an enormous part of the universe. It was already true before anyone was here to notice it. And events that occurred out there, real events, with real physical consequences. Events that released more energy in a moment than most things release across their entire existence. Produced light and radiation and signals of every kind, and all of it has been traveling for an unimaginable amount of time, moving in our direction without closing the distance by a single step. So there are things that happened, specific things, with specific physical consequences. A star that reached a particular kind of ending, sudden and almost incomprehensibly energetic. Two objects that found each other after orbiting for longer than the Earth has existed and collided. A star that was born, lived its entire life, and died. The whole arc from formation to collapse, in a region that had already crossed beyond what we can ever receive. All of it occurred. The light left. And the room you're in right now, and every instrument ever built, and every instrument that will ever be built, will receive none of it. Not eventually, just not at all. There's something worth slowing down on, before moving further into what actually happened out there. The light is traveling. That part is certain. It left the source. It's moving in the right direction. It hasn't stopped. And yet, it isn't arriving. So something about the space between here and there is behaving differently than space usually behaves. Differently than the space in this room. Differently than the space between Earth and the Moon. Differently than the space light crosses when it travels from a nearby star. The difference is that the space itself is getting larger, not the objects in it, the space, the emptiness between things. It stretches continuously in every direction and has been doing so since the beginning of everything. For most distances, this is so gradual that it barely registers as a fact at all. Light from a nearby star crosses the remaining distance, long before the stretching has had time to add anything meaningful to the journey. The signal moves, arrives, and the expansion of space during that crossing was negligible, barely worth mentioning, but for sources that are very far away, the stretching has time to accumulate, and at a certain distance it accumulates faster than the signal can compensate for. What this means in practice is that while the light is in transit, the remaining distance is quietly growing, not because anything is being placed between the signal and us, but because the space itself is expanding, and the expansion keeps adding to the distance faster than the light reduces it. So the light moves forward. It always moves forward. But forward, in this case, is a direction that keeps getting longer while the light is traveling it. The signal isn't falling behind. It's moving at the only speed it has. The space it's crossing is just more than it was a moment ago, and more than that, continuously. The simplest way to hold this is, there's a distance past which space expands faster than light travels. Past that distance, a signal moving toward us is not getting closer, not slowly, not at all. And this distance exists right now. It's a real location, not a wall, not an edge of anything physical, just a threshold in the behavior of space. Everything on our side of it is, in principle, reachable. Everything on the far side isn't, and hasn't been, for a very long time. The light from those regions has been traveling toward us, in some cases, for billions of years, and none of it has made progress. None of it will. What's quieter than the mechanism, and in some ways harder to absorb, is what this means for the things that happened out there. Because the expansion of space doesn't only affect signals that are in transit right now. It affects the record of everything that has ever occurred in those regions. Every event, every explosion, every collision, every birth and death of every star. All of it produced light, and all of that light is subject to the same condition. If it originated far enough away, it isn't coming. It was never going to come. So, there are events, specific ones, with specific physical scales, that occurred completely, that left their mark on the space around them, that sent their signals outward in every direction, and that exist from our position, as if they never happened. Not because we haven't looked carefully enough, not because the instruments aren't sensitive enough, because the geometry of the space between here and there makes arrival structurally impossible. And somewhere out there, past that threshold, 3 things happened that are worth following for a while. A star ran out of time. It had been burning for millions of years, maybe longer, reaching the point where the fuel that kept the pressure outward was no longer enough to hold back the weight of everything above it. The core collapsed. In a fraction of a second, something the size of a city compressed from something the size of a small sun. And the energy released in that compression, the rebound, the shockwave moving outward through the layers above, was enough to tear the entire star apart. This happens somewhere in the universe with a regularity that's difficult to sit with. Not nearby, not in any time frame that touches ordinary experience, but across a universe with hundreds of billions of galaxies, each containing hundreds of billions of stars. The statistics work out such that somewhere, right now, a star is doing this. The one worth following happened in a galaxy far enough away that the light from that galaxy would take an almost incomprehensible amount of time to reach us under any circumstances. Not thousands of years, not millions. Longer, the kind of distance where the number, if stated plainly, passes through the mind without landing anywhere useful. When the star collapsed and the outer layers were thrown outward, the light released in that moment was extraordinary. For a few weeks, just weeks, that single explosion outshone every other star in its galaxy combined. A single point producing more energy than billions of stars, briefly, before the brightness began to fade. That light expanded outward in a sphere, moving in every direction at once, including toward here. It kept moving. The sphere grew. The light traveled through the space, around that galaxy, through the emptiness between galaxies, through vast stretches of nothing. All of it still expanding, still moving, still covering distance in every direction simultaneously. What the mind expects, following this, is that the light would eventually arrive. The journey would be long, enormously long, but light is moving and the destination exists. And at some point in some distant future, the first traces of that explosion would reach here. That's the pattern. That's what light does. What actually happens is quieter and harder to place. The sphere of light, expanding outward from where the star used to be, entered space that was already expanding faster than the light could cross it. The light moved forward. The distance between the edge of that sphere and us grew faster than the sphere could close it. And it has been doing this moving, not arriving, for the entire time since the explosion occurred. Right now, somewhere in the space between here and there, the light from that explosion is traveling. It's moving at the speed light always moves. It has been moving for an enormous amount of time. And the gap between that light and here is not smaller than it was when the explosion first occurred. The expansion of the space it's crossing has kept it open continuously, without pause, and continues to do so. There's something worth staying with in the light itself for a moment. It left the star moving in every direction, toward other parts of that galaxy, toward neighboring galaxies, toward empty space between clusters, and toward here. The portions of that sphere that moved toward nearby galaxies may have arrived by now, may have passed through those galaxies entirely, continuing outward. The portion moving toward here entered the region where expansion dominates, and has been held in that condition ever since. Not stopped, moving, just not closing the distance. A rough comparison. Imperfect, like all comparisons at this scale. Walking forward on a surface that's moving backward faster than you can walk. Every step is real. The motion is real. But the distance between you and where you're going keeps increasing, even as you move toward it. The light is in something like that situation locally. It's doing exactly what light always does. Globally, the relationship between its position and ours is one of continuous separation. And the star itself, what's left of it, is something much smaller and much denser, sitting quietly in the space the star once filled. But the energy that was released, that sphere, still expanding outward in every direction, that part isn't over. It's still happening. The sphere is still growing, still moving, still crossing the space between there and everything else. The explosion, in that sense, is ongoing. It just isn't arriving anywhere near here, and hasn't been since it began. There's another way to follow this, which is to think about the galaxy rather than just the explosion. That galaxy existed before the star collapsed. It continues now. Other stars in it are burning. Other events are occurring. And the galaxy has been producing light continuously across its entire history. Not just from that one explosion, but from billions of stars, each one burning for millions of years, each one eventually reaching its own end in its own way. All of that light has been expanding outward, the portion moving in our direction, accumulating in the space between here and there. For an enormous amount of time, none of it has arrived. Not from the explosion, not from the ordinary light of the galaxy's other stars, not from any event that has occurred there across its entire history. The galaxy exists in a region that crossed our horizon, the threshold where expansion overtakes arrival. And from that point onward, everything that happens there, everything that has happened there, everything that will happen there, is outside of what can reach us. So the explosion is one event among an essentially uncountable number of events occurring in that galaxy right now, all of which are producing signals, all of which are sending light outward, and all of which are in the same condition, moving, expanding, traveling in every direction, including this one, and not getting closer. The galaxy is out there, active, ongoing, full of the same kinds of events that fill every other part of the universe, and the distance between here and all of it simply keeps growing, quietly, in every direction at once, while the light keeps moving and the gap stays open. Somewhere in that same region of the universe, two objects found each other. Not found in any meaningful sense, just the ordinary behavior of mass near other mass. Two things drawn gradually closer by the pull, each one exerted on the space around it. They began to orbit, slowly at first, then less slowly, the distance between them decreasing over an amount of time that has no useful comparison in ordinary experience. Millions of years of slow approach, the orbit tightening with each pass, until the distance collapsed entirely and the two objects became one. The energy released in that final moment propagated outward through space as a disturbance, not light, not heat, but a change in the geometry of space itself, a ripple moving outward in every direction at once, passing through everything in its path without being absorbed or scattered or slowed, carrying the record of what happened encoded in the shape of the wave itself. That ripple is out there right now. It has been traveling since the moment of the merger, moving outward through the galaxy where it originated, through the space between that galaxy and the next, through the vast emptiness between clusters of galaxies, through everything undimmed. The record of those two objects and their long, slow approach preserved in the geometry of a wave that nothing can stop and nothing can absorb. And it isn't getting closer. The space it's crossing is expanding, the same condition that holds the light from the supernova. In transit, without progress, the ripple moves forward through whatever small region of space it currently occupies, and the distance between here and that ripple grows at the same time, and the two movements cancel each other, and the gap stays open. The wave passes through galaxy after galaxy, through regions of space that have never been observed from here, through the dark between things, and none of that crossing brings it closer to us by any amount that will ever matter. What's worth staying with is not the event itself, not the mechanics of the orbit, or the moment of collision, but the fact that the signal from it is permanently in motion and permanently out of reach. It will keep traveling. The ripple doesn't weaken in the way light weakens over distance. It will be moving, essentially unchanged, through the space beyond our horizon, for longer than the current age of the universe has lasted. Moving through regions we will never observe, carrying a record no instrument here will ever receive. And it's not alone in that condition. Every event that has occurred beyond the horizon, every collision, every explosion, every object that reached the end of something and released energy into the space around it, produced a signal that is doing the same. Thing traveling, not arriving. The signals accumulate out there, moving in every direction through the space beyond what we can reach. Some of them heading toward us. All of them subject to the same condition. The distance between here and each of them growing faster than any of them can close it. The room around you is full of signals from the other direction, from events that occurred close enough that their light and their ripples and their radiation have been arriving here continuously. The space you're in right now is being crossed by signals from thousands of sources, arriving from every direction, passing through the walls and the floor and the air without pause. Those signals completed their journeys. They originated on the right side of the threshold, in regions close enough that the expansion of space during their crossing didn't accumulate fast enough to hold them back. The signals from beyond the horizon are doing the same thing, moving through space, crossing distance, heading in every direction, including this one. The only difference is where they started. The threshold between arriving and not arriving is invisible and structural, determined entirely by the distance at which the expansion of space begins to outpace the signal's progress. On one side of that threshold, signals complete their journeys. On the other, they travel forever. The merger happened on the wrong side. The ripple has been traveling since, and the distance between here and that ripple is larger right now than it was when the two objects collided. And it will be larger still, continuously. For as long as the ripple moves and the space between here and there keeps expanding, which is to say, for longer than it's useful to think about. Somewhere beyond that threshold, a star was born, not the one that collapsed and exploded, a different one, in a different part of that region, forming from a cloud of gas and dust that had been drifting and cooling for longer than the Earth has existed. The cloud contracted slowly under its own weight, the pressure at the center building until it crossed the threshold where hydrogen begins to fuse and a star ignited. Light expanded outward from it for the first time. The surrounding gas was pushed back. The star settled into the long, stable period that most stars spend most of their existence in, burning steadily, changing slowly, producing light continuously in every direction. It burned for a long time, long enough that the light it produced during the early part of its life had already traveled an enormous distance by the time it reached the middle of its life, long enough that entire civilizations could have risen and disappeared in the time between its birth and its death. The star just continued, the balance between gravity and pressure, holding the fuel depleting gradually, the light continuing outward in every direction. And then, eventually, it ended. The fuel ran out, the balance broke, and the star collapsed into whatever a star of that size becomes at the end, something small and dense and dim, or nothing recognizable at all, depending on the mass. The light it had been producing continuously for its entire life stopped. The space around it, which had been filled with that light for as long as the star existed, gradually emptied as the last of the light traveled outward and away. The entire arc of that star birth, long middle death, occurred beyond our horizon. Every photon it produced across its entire existence expanded outward and entered the space between here and there. The portion heading in our direction, subject to the same condition as everything else from that region. None of it arrived. Not the light from its birth, not the light from its long, stable middle, not the light from its death. The star lived its entire life, and the universe here received no record of any of it. The supernova was brief, enormous, but brief. The merger had a duration, but still a defined end. The star is something else, an entire existence. A complete arc spanning an amount of time that makes the supernova feel instantaneous by comparison, and all of it. Every moment of that existence, every photon produced across the entire lifespan, sent signals outward that are traveling and not arriving. The light from the first moments of that star's life is somewhere out there, right now. The light from its middle years is somewhere out there. The light from its final collapse is somewhere out there. All of it, moving, all of it heading in our direction, all of it separated from here by a distance that keeps growing. The star's entire history is distributed across the space between here and there, in the form of light that has been traveling for the entire duration of our own history and will continue traveling for longer than that. A telescope of any size, pointed in the direction of that star, would find nothing, not because the star isn't there, not because the light isn't coming, but because the light cannot complete the journey. The looking isn't the limitation. The structure of the space between here and there is the limitation. And no improvement in instruments or patience or sensitivity changes what that structure does to signals that originate beyond a certain distance. The star formed and burned and died completely, in the same way that stars on our side of the horizon do. Its existence was no less real for being unreachable. The light it produced was no less real for never arriving. And that light is still out there. The light from its birth, from its long, quiet middle, from its final collapse, all of it, distributed across the space between here and there, moving intact. The record of an entire existence traveling through regions of the universe that have never had any connection to here and never will. The room you're in right now sits inside a sphere from which signals have been arriving continuously from every direction, from distances that range from nearby to almost incomprehensibly far. The light and the ripples and the radiation of everything within reach, crossing the distance and completing the journey. That sphere contains an enormous amount of history, an almost incomprehensible number of stars, an enormous number of events, a record that stretches back nearly to the beginning of everything. And surrounding that sphere, in every direction, the rest of it continues. The star that formed and burned and died. The two objects that spiraled together over millions of years. The explosion that briefly outshone an entire galaxy. All of it out there. All of it producing signals. All of it in motion. The light and the ripples, and the record of all of it traveling through space that keeps expanding. The distance between here and all of it, growing quietly and continuously, while the events themselves remain complete and real, and entirely absent from anything that can be received here. The universe continues doing what it has always been doing. Space expands. Light travels. The distance between things grows at the same rate it has been growing for as long as any of this has existed. None of that changes because of what has been said here, or because anyone is listening to it. It just continues, in every direction, at every scale, without pause or variation. The light from the supernova is somewhere out there, right now. Moving. The ripple from the merger is somewhere out there, right now, moving. The light from every moment of that star's existence is distributed across the space between here and there, each portion of it traveling through whatever small region of space it currently occupies. The record of 3 events, and 1 entire stellar lifetime moving through the dark in the direction of here. None of it arriving, all of it continuing. The expansion of space has been accelerating. The distance between here and distant regions growing faster now than it was when the universe was younger. So the signals that are in transit out there are in a condition that has been deepening, not waiting to resolve. The light moves, the space grows, and the two have been doing this together for longer than it's useful to try to measure. The room you're in has probably been quiet for a while now. Whatever sounds were present earlier may have faded, and the sky above wherever you are, above the walls and the roof, and whatever lies between you and open space, is being crossed right now by signals from every direction. Some of those signals originated close enough that they've been arriving here for as long as the Earth has existed. Some originated farther away and took longer but arrived. All of them completed the journey because they originated on the right side of the threshold, in regions close enough that the expansion of space during the crossing didn't accumulate fast enough to hold them back. There are stars that are producing light right now, and that light is heading in every direction. And the portion of it heading toward here will arrive in some number of years, that is. At these distances, almost brief, the light will complete the journey the same way it always does. And there are other stars in other galaxies, so far away that the light they're producing right now is already in the same condition as the supernova light and the merger ripple moving, not progressing, held in transit by the expansion of the space it's crossing. Those stars just burn, producing light in every direction, the same as any other star. The portion of their light heading toward here is in a different situation from the portion heading toward their neighboring galaxies, but nothing about the star itself reflects this. It just continues. The difference between arriving and not arriving is invisible from the source. A star beyond the horizon produces light, exactly the way a star within the horizon produces light. The light leaves, moves outward, and the condition it enters, expanding space that outpaces the crossing, operates quietly in the space between here and there, without any visible sign at either end. The star continues burning. The light continues traveling. Neither of them carries any indication of which side of the threshold they're on. So the universe, from any given location, is divided in a way that leaves no mark on either side of the division. The stars beyond the horizon look from their own vicinity, the same as any other stars. The expanding space that holds those signals in transit looks from any local vantage point, the same as the space anywhere else. The threshold between arriving and not arriving sits where it has always sat, in every direction simultaneously, and the universe on both sides of it simply continues, events occurring, signals leaving, space expanding, the whole of it proceeding at the rate it has always proceeded, indifferent to which signals complete their journeys and which ones don't. The light from those 3 events keeps moving through the space beyond that threshold. It will be moving tomorrow. It will be moving long after everything currently visible from here has faded beyond detection. The record of the supernova, the merger, the entire life of that star, all of it in transit, all of it intact, traveling through regions of the universe that continue expanding around it, quietly in every direction at once. Things happen out there. They happen completely, the way things always happen, with physical consequences, with energy released, with signals sent outward in every direction. The events are real. The signals are real. And some of those signals are heading toward here right now, have been heading toward here for an enormous amount of time, and will continue heading toward here for longer than that. They just aren't arriving. not because the signals are too faint or too old or too damaged by the journey, just because the space between here and there keeps growing, and has been growing faster than the signals can cross it, and will continue doing so. The signals travel, the distance grows in the opposite direction, and the two never meet. The star that collapsed, the two objects that spiraled together over millions of years, the star that formed and burned and died without leaving any trace. Here, all of it is just what that condition looks like when you follow it into specific events. The condition itself is simple. Space expands. Past a certain distance, it expands faster than anything can cross it. And so the universe past that distance continues without any path toward being known from here. Everything out there continues exactly as it would, regardless. Stars form and burn and die. Objects orbit and merge. Galaxies move through space, producing light in every direction, indifferent to whether that light completes a journey toward any particular location. The universe beyond the horizon is as full of activity as the universe within it. The events occur on both sides of the threshold, with equal indifference to which side they're on. The light from the supernova will still be moving in a billion years. The ripple from the merger will still be moving in a billion years. The light from that star's entire life, from its first ignition to its final collapse, will still be distributed across the space between here and there, moving through regions that have never had any connection to here, carrying a record that nothing here will ever receive. The universe doesn't require observation to continue. It doesn't require anyone here to receive its signals in order for those signals to exist or to travel. The light moves because that's what light does. The space expands because that's what space does. The threshold sits where it sits because of the relationship between those two things. And it has been sitting there for as long as any of this has existed. The room you're in right now is somewhere inside the reachable portion, close enough to enough things that signals have been arriving here continuously, from every direction, for as long as the Earth has existed. That arrival continues right now. Light is landing on every surface near you, passing through the walls, crossing the space between here and wherever it came from, completing journeys that began years or centuries or millions of years ago. That part of the universe is present here. In the most literal sense, its light is here. Its record is here. Its history is arriving continuously and quietly, the way it always has, and surrounding all of that in every direction past the threshold where expansion overtakes arrival. The rest of it continues. The events that already happened and left no trace here. The events happening right now that will leave no trace here. The signals in transit that have been traveling for longer than the Earth has existed and will be traveling long after it's gone. All of it out there, all of it real, all of it moving through a universe that continues regardless of what any part of it can receive from any other part. The universe keeps going. The light keeps traveling. The space between here and all of it keeps growing. Quietly, in every direction at once, the way it always has, the way it always will. While the room stays quiet and the time passes and somewhere out there a star that nobody here will ever know about continues burning, producing light in every direction, some of it heading toward here, none of it arriving, all of it perfectly, quietly, real.